Donald Fleck is a therapist who began meditating more than 40 years ago. He uses mindfulness and meditation with his clients. We'll be talking about meditation and mindfulness in his own life. Hi, Donald. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I want to talk about what your practice has been, how you came to it, all kinds of different things.
How I came to mindfulness. Yeah.
Yeah, or your meditation practice.
Yeah, sure. It started when I had a really stressful job. I was a businessman before I was a therapist. I was working on Wall Street at a certain point.
Wow.
And it was like so stressful. I just didn't know what to do. But about that time, a guy named Herbert Benson wrote a book called The Relaxation Response. And I picked that up, and it said that if you just follow your breath and say Om over and over again, that it might quiet you down. So I found a chapel near my office on Wall Street, St. Paul's Chapel, and I'd go there during lunchtime, which was like 20 minutes, and I would sit there watching my breath and going, and it helped. It really helped. So that was like in the mid-70s, and I did that for a long time, on and off, whenever I was like really stressed.
Mm-hmm. And you just learned that from a book?
I learned it from a book. It was like it was called The Relaxation Response because Benson had taken the elements of it that were helpful and removed them from the religious part. Because I didn't want a religion. I wanted a way to get unstressed, you know.
And then what happened? So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit because I knew, I had a hunch you were going to ask me this.
Yeah.
So there was a TV program that had a big effect on me in the mid-'80s by Bill Moyers, and it was called Healing and the Mind. And at that point, the idea was sort of revolutionary that your mind would have to do with healing. And one of the segments was Bill Moyers interviewing John Kabat-Zinn about mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Right.
And it was amazing because he was taking people with untreatable pain and helping them rather than run away from the pain, but how to help them be aware of the pain. And you'd say, well, wouldn't that be like counterintuitive? But while it is counterintuitive, it was helpful because people could recognize, okay, there's the pain. It's in this place in my body, and they were able to function anyway. I was just blown away by that. So then, when I became a therapist, and I had people with panic disorder, and I was trying to help them, I realized that some of the same stuff could help with panic disorder, that instead of focusing attention away from the feared memory, we could, in little bits at a time, so it's not overwhelming, focus attention onto those, and that would be helpful.
And that's sort of the mindfulness thing, right? So you're sort of really, attuning into some particular thing. Previous to this segment, we were talking about attuning into sort of the more positive things, the chocolates, the water, the birds, you know, the relaxation or whatever it is. And now you're talking about using sort of the same technique, but sort of to tune into the pain and tune either the physical pain or emotional, spiritual, psychological pain.
Yeah, so let me make it more personal. And around 1990, both of my parents died within 6 months of each other. And I found, while I was grieving, I found that I wasn't thinking much about their deaths. And I was savvy enough to realize that this wasn't really probably the most healthy way to deal with their deaths. So I would start meditating every day in the morning, and I would just consciously bring to mind their deaths and my memories of them, my happy memories, all bad memories, the whole kit and caboodle about my parents, and let the feelings come in so that I could really grieve their deaths. And I did that for a period of about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And so that's how I did it in my own life, as opposed to helping others. It was a very intense experience.
I had kind of a similar experience when I had started to really meditate. Maybe like I had sort of did bits and pieces here and there, little things, and in a 6-month period of time, my husband and I separated, and my father died, and so I went to not, we would call it Sangha, but to a group in which we meditated, and I would sit in the back of the room and cry. And I swear the teacher would say, he probably didn't know my name. He probably didn't know my name, but he referred to me as the woman who sits in the back of the room and cried. That's what I was imagining that. I don't know that he did, but I just, because it was like really like every time I would go there, I would sit in the back of the room and cry. At first I started out in front, and then I had to move myself to the back of the room, but not like sobbing, but just like, you know, where you're sort of starting to get in touch with all that stuff. You're sort of overwhelmed by it in a way that you can't even connect to.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little wetness in my eyes just hearing you talk about that. And that's why, well, one of the things you learn as a mindful therapist is don't pass the Kleenex.
Oh, yeah?
Because passing the Kleenex is a signal like,
to be
come
quiet,
on, let's get over this. Let's wipe the tears away, as opposed to let them flow.
Yes, and I've heard that before, too. I also mediate. And I think, I don't know where I heard that from. I don't think it was through mediation, but I felt like that. Like when someone starts to get really emotional and then you hand them a box of tissues, it's sort of like, wrap that up and let's move on. But really it's like, go ahead, cry. Let it all out.
Do you want to know some more of my story?
Yes, absolutely.
So
I thought this was a show about me.
When my parents died, I had a small inheritance, and it was enough that I could begin to change out of this business field, which I was getting a little tired of, and having a feeling that the older I got, the less good I was at it, because I was in marketing, and marketing is about understanding trends, which it's helpful to be young when you're trying to understand trends. So I was actually getting worse at it as I got older. So I had the opportunity to change careers, and I thought of becoming a minister. And I went to this church which allowed lay members to give sermons. They're technically called homilies, but to allow them to give something that was a sermon. And one of the things I got to do was a meditation sermon. So I was asked, along with my friend Charlotte, to do introduce meditation to the congregation of this church. And they were just coming to do their usual Sunday thing, you know. So like, how do you do that? So I went down to the store and I found a book of guided meditations by Thich Nhat Hanh. And so I realized, wow, you don't have to have them sit silently for 20 minutes. You can have them sit for 5 minutes during a guided meditation. And that was a real eye-opener there. So I started using a lot of guided meditations, and then that led me to more of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings. And so I'd say he's my main guy in terms of Buddhist teaching.
Yeah, and he's really a big one into the mindfulness of everyday living, isn't he? I mean, does he even have a book by that title or something? But really being present in the present moment and really experiencing everything as it is.
Yeah, I love it when he wrote to his friend who was coming over for dinner, and his friend said, well, let me do the dishes. And he said, you can only do the dishes if you're going to wash them mindfully. So I always remember that when I'm washing the dishes, you know, to feel the soap and become present for that. You know?
And so now do you do that to your friends when they come over and they're like, oh, let me help? And you're like, you can only bring this to the kitchen if you do it mindfully.
I haven't tried it because I'm not Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm Donald. So I just enjoy the dishes myself. And I have a bunch of nice friends, and often they offer to do the dishes. So I have to say, I have some great friends.
Yeah, in the previous segment, we really talked a lot about mindfulness. Now you said that you're mindful when you do the dishes. Are there other times that you have sort of brought mindfulness into your own personal practice? I mean,
well, I think mindful eating. And at this point, I'm feeling a little dry mouth. And if you don't mind, I'm going to open up this tangerine. So I find mindfulness of foods to be really big for me. So you could say I'm gripped in the oral stage of development, you know, like how the psychoanalysts like to do it. But I really enjoy eating food mindfully, and I can actually smell this, and I can feel the oils squirting onto my skin as I bend it, and I can hear it. So I'd say primarily it's when I'm eating that I become mindful. But I also love walking mindfully, and I love waking up to sound. Would you like some of this?
No, I'm fine.
It's really tart.
Oh, well, after the chocolates, I'm not sure.
And look at this one. It's got hair sticking out on it, and it does smell good. Just have a whiff.
Oh, okay, I'll take a slice.
No, you don't have to eat it.
No, I'll eat it.
You can't eat it.
I want to.
Okay, you can eat it.
I want to. You can't take it back now.
You smell it?
I do smell it.
So I
and
like.
again, with you know, as with the chocolates, this is the smell is equally as good as the taste. You know, maybe if it's really that tart, maybe I'll even feel like it's better.
You might be a mindfulness of aromas person.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
So I like mindfulness of foods, and I like mindfulness of walking. And interestingly enough, it's not the feeling of my feet walking that gets to me when I'm walking. It's pretty tart, right?
It's a little tart.
You want some more? It's the sounds. Very often when I'm walking on automatic pilot, I'm just aware of my brain, but then at some point I'll notice sounds. And so the outside world is what wakes me up to be mindful, to get out of my head. Birds singing, people talking, even horns tooting become interesting. So I'm also very mindful when I'm walking and going somewhere.
So you sort of started to get involved in meditation by doing this Om practice by who is?
Herbert Benson, the relaxation response. Yeah.
And then you got further along in through John Kabat-Zinn.
John Kabat-Zinn was a great influence, and then I used
reduction.
Mindfulness. I'm interrupting you. Yeah. And then he has a book called Full Catastrophe Living, which described in detail how to do his 8-week workshop.
Yeah. And then you got sort of more involved into Thich Nhat Hanh.
More into Thich Nhat Hanh's practices, right? And so I always wanted to integrate this into my psychotherapy practice. So it turns out there are a number of really brilliant psychologists who also practice this mindfulness. So Jack Kornfield is one of them. He's enormously funny and a great teacher. He's boiled down the teachings to 25 lessons, which he has in a book called The Wise Heart. An amazing teacher. And Sharon Salzberg, who's local, and I think you know her.
I do know her, yes. Yeah. She will be on the show soon, hopefully.
So she's been an amazing teacher over the years. And then there's the New York Insight Meditation Center, where I learned Vipassana meditation. That's where I had my first meditation lessons. It's much easier to learn this from a teacher than from a book, I have to say.
And why is that? Why do you think that is?
Because the learning is experiential, and each person has a very unique response to being mindful. Like, well, what happens with things I don't like, for example.
Right.
And it's much better that they get a direct answer to that, and that the answers are applying directly to what just happened rather than to some dim recollection of what happened a week ago.
So, so you went to Insight, so you've been back and forth with Thich Nhat Hanh, and then you went to Insight and learned Vipassana. But now you're back with sort of a Thich Nhat Hanh group?
I stay with the Thich Nhat Hanh group, and I find that he's my mainstay teacher, the ground of the teachings, because it's all, he's an amazing teacher, because he's been teaching for maybe 50, 60 years. I mean, not many teachers get to teach that long. He has this comprehensive system which can all be encapsulated into, like he has a book called Pieces Every Step, which encapsulates his teachings into maybe 80 or 100 half-page summaries, and it's possible just to read any one of those and let that be sort of a guidance for the day. It's very useful.
So we've been talking about mindfulness, and I'm wondering if there's another piece to your practice at all, or is it really just meditation?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, just sort of mindfulness in everyday living, or is there a sort of a sit on the cushion kind of a practice involved in?
I try to sit on the cushion for 45 minutes a day, although I often use the couch. But that's like so that would be a development of concentration, and mindfulness would be development of an appreciation of the moment. So there's sort of like two different angles. I want to tell you about a little girl who was a teacher for me.
Yeah.
So I was riding in the subway one day, just when I was about to go to Fordham to get my MSW and become a psychotherapist. And there were a bunch of school kids with their teachers, and they were yelling and screaming as, I think they must have been 6th graders, maybe they're 12 years old, or maybe they're 10 or 11 years old, but they're screaming and screaming. So this one girl must have really been irritating her. So she says, "Maria, goes, Maria. That's all she does. And Maria looks at her, and she goes, just like that.
Wow.
I thought, wow, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So when I was getting my degree, I managed to write all of my papers about teaching mindfulness to children. And I actually had a chance to do that for a while through Mindful Schools is one of 3 or 4 programs that teaches you to teach mindfulness to kids in schools, and had a really good time doing that. So Maria was a great teacher for me.
Yeah.
I never saw her again, of course, but
yeah.
she was a great teacher.
And what was it? What was that lesson for you? What did Maria teach you?
The miracle of mindfulness, that if a person knows how to sort of get focused within, they can immediately go from craziness to peace.
And do you think are you able to do that?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. I can be, I'm like everybody else. I can get involved and talk, and like just imagining like at a party and everyone's talking and eating and yelling at each other, and then I can pop out of that into just seeing myself standing there with all the sounds and the people around me. It's still like for the first time when that happens. And it happens a lot.
And did that change over the years for you? Did you, I mean, were you able to do that from the get-go, or is that something that sort of evolved for you over the years?
I'd say that came after maybe the 30th year or so, but I think everybody is different.
Yeah.
But they say in mindfulness, you know, how long will it take to learn it? 10 years, right? And then what if I try really hard? Then how long will it take? 20 years.
Yeah, right.
So you just have to sort of let it take its own pace.
But it takes time. So, you know, I mean, like if you know, you're new and you walk out there and you think, oh, why can't I? And you start meditating, why can't I get that calm right away? Well, it takes practice, right? I mean, it takes some time.
It does, and I think it's really good to start with something you like.
Oh, yeah?
Like for example, I'd say to anyone listening, or because I know you're well advanced in these things, but for anyone else who's listening, you might try to think of something that you enjoy eating a lot, and let that be your one of your mindful activities.
Yeah.
Or believe it or not, cleaning things can result in a good mindful activity.
Yeah.
So brushing the teeth mindfully, showering mindfully, doing the dishes mindfully.
Right.
Cleaning off a surface mindfully. So pick something that you like something that involves cleaning, like brushing your teeth, and see if you can make it a mindful habit to every time you do it, to do it mindfully. Now,
and those are things
that doesn't work, you forget. But then you have to also cultivate forgiveness and be happy when you remember.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is those are some activities that we often do not mindfully. You know, those are the activities that we often are doing the dishes while we're thinking about, I don't have time to do these dishes, and I need to get going here, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. And those are activities that we're most frequently like the opposite of mindful. And yeah, so
exactly. The more automatic piloty they are, the better they're going to ripen up to be mindful.
Yeah, and they're also simple and like you know, like brushing the teeth. You know, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The dishes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. But they're short, kind of encapsulated beginnings and ends to those activities, which is really nice. You know.
Perfect. Exactly. And then so we would form an intention to, say, brush our teeth mindfully. Right. And we use the word intention rather than a promise or a commitment because we're human and we get distracted. Habits are habits because we're used to not thinking about them. So if we promise ourselves to do it and then we forget, then we're probably going to give up mindfulness altogether.
I can't do it.
I can't do this.
I'm so stupid. I'm so bad. What's my problem? Why can't I do this?
Yeah, I noticed the brush in, and then I don't notice the brush back. Like so, we have to have that.
Or I didn't even remember to do it. You know.
Right, and it's been a month.
Yeah.
So we need to have that intention feeling rather than the promise feeling, and when to congratulate ourselves, like a friend of mine says, set the intention, do the action, and then praise yourself for the effort. Just like that.
Do I get to praise myself even if I forget?
Well, that's a little tricky. Let's say you've forgotten to brush your teeth mindfully. My solution to that is do something right mindful at that moment and congratulate yourself. So I've forgotten to brush my teeth for a month, and I just realized it, but I have this tangerine in my hand. Okay, I'm gonna let this be really mindful. Yeah. Congratulations, Donald. You just had a mindful bite of tangerine. Another way that I get to be mindful is little reminders around the house. So
Oh.
that's a little saying that I have by the bed, and it says, waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. It goes on. So it's like, it's not a meditation in itself, but it's like a way to help me savor life and remember to be mindful.
That's nice. So if my intention is to be mindful of brushing my teeth, I could put a note on my mirror or something, or in my bathroom to remind myself to be.
Yeah, or you could write it on the mirror with lipstick or with a black marker. So it's always there. Yeah, have little reminders.
Yeah.
And then something that you like doing, because it's easiest to learn this stuff with stuff that I like to do. So I love these tastes, and I love eating, and I guess I am rather oral.
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying this tangerine.
Yeah.
Do you want some more?
No. Too tart. I'll start with something I like. Yeah, so I think I had told you the story, not here, but another time, about how when I was in Burma, and they were big into the being aware at every moment, that kind of thing. And I was on retreat, and so what do I have to do but do that? Yeah. Still, it was very hard. I couldn't do it for weeks on end. I could not remember to be mindful in the everyday activities. And then finally one day it just clicked. It just happened, and I felt terrible that I couldn't do it, and I felt awful that I kept forgetting. But eventually it did sort of click in. But it was weeks on retreat, So I think if you're in everyday life, to remember is going to be practically, it's expected that it's going to take many, many weeks to be able to remember. And if you do it once, then,
Imagine it was several weeks before it really sort of snapped in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we really have to cultivate this sort of self-acceptance that even though I want to be mindful, I'll be mindful at the times I remember, and then I can congratulate myself when I am mindful.
Yeah. So we only have a few more minutes. Is there anything any advice you might give to people who are sort of starting out meditating? Or how to start?
I'd say go gently. Put up a reminder around your house. Choose something that you love to eat and intend to be mindful of that. And also choose something that has to do with cleaning things like your teeth, the shower, and try being mindful of that and see how it goes.
Yeah. So how can we find you, Donald? What can we do to find you?
You can find me on the internet.
Yeah.
You can Google Donald Mindfulness NYC, or you can go to my website, which is learnmindfulnessnyc.com. I think that's probably the best way. And then there's a contact form if you want to anyone wants to send me an email. I love hearing from new people. I have days of mindfulness 3 or 4 times a year that are free in the New York Public Libraries.
I've been to
so
them.
if you put in Donald NYPL mindfulness, you'll see what's coming up there.
Yeah, I really
love to have
enjoyed
people
it.
come to those.
Yeah, the library was really a nice experience. It's really not your traditional meditation environment, but that's kind of makes it really special.
Yeah.
Because it feels very inclusive,
It is. So I really work with a kind of secular mindfulness. So that's one reason I don't use bells, for example, because it has a sense of being religious. And the library wants you to be secular because it's not religion and state are separate.
Yeah.
So the library is a wonderful place to teach mindfulness this way.
Yeah. And do you do any other, I know it's the day-longs, but you also do workshops, is that true?
I do a workshop for people with a lot of negative thinking, where it's become so much that they want to say, how can I deal with this negative thinking? It's called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So there's a mindfulness-based things for eating, and there's a mindfulness-based thing for depression and anxiety. That's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that I teach. And there's mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is the original created by Jon Kabat-Zinn about 30 years ago. Yeah.
So you sort of combine the mindfulness-based stress reduction with the cognitive.
With cognitive therapy. Yeah, we took the best of Jon Kabat-Zinn's work and took it with the best of psychology and mental health and combined them into mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and I love teaching that workshop.
It sounds like a wonderful workshop. I have wanted to take it over the years, but I've never quite gotten around to it. So I think
I can help you with that.
Yeah, I know you can. I know you could. I should, though. I should just take it, right?
Let's let it be an intention, and you'll know when the time is right.
Yeah, I think it's more of a scheduling issue, right? You know, like when the times kind of come together.
Yeah.
So it's been really a pleasure to have you here, Donald, and I hope we can do something in the future.